Let me just talk about the politics of liability, because it's really hard. It's a really hard political situation. So the Democrats hate tort reform, generally. And this reeks of tort reform. So generally, the Democrats don't like this kind of legislation. The Republicans, they don't like government in their back pocket. And so this has those elements of government telling you you got to do things in a certain way. There's administrative costs. If you want the liability relief, you got to do certain things. How is that fair? How does that affect my business? I'm not part of the problem. So you have a very, very challenging situation in which sort of institutionally both sides hate it. So and how this happened in New Hampshire, maybe this is illustrative, is that it failed for 4 sessions in a row. Started out as mandatory, then made voluntary. That helped, got some more support. But ultimately, what it took was a state senator who was a champion. And that state senator happened to be on the budget committee, writing the budget, and in sort of 11th hour budget stuff, this got tucked into the bill. And that's how this happened. That's how we have this. Now, when I go back to the legislature and I ask for more things, we just passed a municipal aspect to this. So we did not have the ability to certify municipalities. So we're creating now a municipal program. I went back to the legislature and I got through the House committee and it was 19-0. And it was unanimous in the House, consent. I went to the Senate. It was 5-0 in the committee and unanimous on consent. So now that we have it, it's universally liked. But getting over the finish line is really hard. Yeah. And it requires lots of partnerships. I've been working with Minnesota. They're trying to do this. And they get closer and closer. But the challenges that come up there, and maybe that's similar here, is that you have an urban-rural challenge. And that's what ultimately was the problem in Minnesota. And I've heard the same in Maine.
That's helpful.
I'm going to step in. I'm not sure this is, there it is. My name is Chris Stepanuk. I am a faculty member in the Rubenstein School of Environment and Natural Resources at the University of Vermont. And participant, what am I? I'm a staff member with the Lake Champlain Sea Grant, which is one of the co-sponsors of today's event. And so you don't have to listen to Chris all day, we decided that I could MC this little piece of the agenda. And so we wanted to roll in, as you have done so well. So thanks, Ted. Moving into a conversation about limited liability laws and what could that mean for this area, for New York or for Vermont. And we wanted to have different perspectives shared about pros and cons, motivations, barriers from various individuals who come with different thoughts. So joining Ted here today, we have Vinnie Crocitto with the Holiday Inn Resort in Lake George, and we have Jeremie MacEwan with MacEwan's Land Care, who's been operating for about 20 years out of Bolton Landing. So one of the things we wanted to do is to allow the 2 new panelists to give us just a few minutes of your perspective of what do you think from a business owner's perspective or from a private contractor's perspective of a limited liability law. Is it a win? Is it a lose? Are people going to run screaming away? And we have some set questions, but we also want to open the floor to all of you to ask questions if you have want to help to talk about this for about 20 minutes for this conversation. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. I mean, from that standpoint, nobody wants to see, honestly, another layer of regulation. It's got to be a little careful about that. Some of the concerns I would see is if you're getting sued, what is the limit? Do they challenge the law itself? Do they challenge the state? So where does that leave the business owner? If there is a slip and fall, what protection does it really give us? We have a cap, but can we get sued past that, and will that get challenged, at a higher court or whatever? What is the cap? What is the limited liability? What are the guidelines to it? And how does it really protect us? If the limited liability is $10 million, it doesn't do a lot for us. If it's 200,000, it does a lot for us.
Thank you.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, I'd like to learn a little bit more about it. I'm kind of new to this whole thing here, but I am a business owner, and when you plow snow in the wintertime, you want to make sure people are safe and not falling down and getting hurt. So I think it's something to be explored for sure.
Are there questions from the group here that you would like to ask from the different perspectives from your questions, or otherwise we can go to some that we had put together in advance?
Sorry, I guess you'll continue to hear, but I think, Vinnie, and I'll start with you, that, obviously there's interest to bring, they always say things roll up, the sidewalks roll up here, after Columbus Day, and there's always a struggle to kind of keep things open in the wintertime. And I think, as we try to expand those shoulder seasons and carry businesses through the winter, you've been successful, I think, keeping the Holiday Inn open for the most part. But, when winter comes, what kind of flags come up for you, and, the level that you take, to protect your customers? I mean, because you want them to come back, you want them to feel safe. And, does that, and you sit on the Lake George Town Board, who's been, a leader around the basin and road salt reduction, so maybe, sorry to put you on the spot, but, that balancing act, so where does that seesaw go, and what's going,
Well,
kind of
yeah,
through
I
your
mean,
head?
yeah, we do. It's difficult to stay open all winter, and it's a full-service property, but it's important for our local economy, I think. And but it's difficult from economics and operational to take on as it pertains to the expense of keeping our guests safe. And you're right. I sit on the town board, obviously, and I've learned a lot about the importance of salt reduction and what it means to the quality of our lake. By working with them. Lake George is swim certified, and we've had great success with it. We really have. I've brought some of those principles over to the Holiday Inn with the help of the LGA and some of the experts you've brought on board. Phil, I don't know if he's here, but he's been great. But it absolutely is a challenge. When we look at something and we take something new on, we got to look at the budget. We have to look at the guests, the public. We have to look at the environment. And we'd like to do that equally at the same time. You look at the budget, can we do this? Can we get the materials and the supplies that we need? We look at our guests. Are they safe? Will they feel safe? So many of our guests want to see salt. They want to see sand. They want to hear it under their feet. When they look out and they don't see anything, some of them will say something. So how do you educate the guest or the customer that we can make it safe and help us implement some of this? And of course, the environment and what it does for our lake, how much it helps our lake.
So I'm going to play off of one thing that you just said. One of the things that you'll see in the next presentation coming from the University of Vermont is one of the drivers of the University of Vermont to reduce salt use on campus was in infrastructure costs. And damages to infrastructure and the cost to replace that. So I'm just wondering, from the business perspective, do you see infrastructure costs that you're having to replace doorways or entrances or stairways or things because of salt?
Oh, absolutely. We're an inside corridor, hotel, and our carpets get beat up, much quicker with salt. And people want to see a lot of salt by those entryways, so we see that. Yeah, no question.
I'm going to turn to Jeremie with.
I have one
sorry.
comment to make about liability while we're on the topic. I just wanted to share a comment about liability, and I think important things to consider is education, which Vinnie, you spoke about, as well as documentation, which we've touched on. being able to provide documentation in a case of a slip and fall accident. How are you proving when you serviced, how much you serviced, which is part of the technology and equipment that's available, which is why it's important to be able to invest in the right knowledge with some of the evidence and training that best practices that have been provided by the local towns in this environment. The full package is available here, and what this community is doing is providing all of that information. Each individual brings a different piece to the table, which is why you guys are so successful here. So I commend you for that. Those are some of my perspectives as an end user and also an equipment provider. Those are some of my takeaways.
I would just note that the New Hampshire law requires people to document their application. It doesn't quite say how they have to do it, but it does require them to document it and every storm, and to keep that for a period of 3 years. So we don't get it. I don't get to see those. I don't want to see those. That documentation, but it is there in case they ever have to produce it as part of a lawsuit. So that's one of the things that I think has come out of this, has been an increased understanding of the need for documentation. And anybody who's been through any of the CIMA training, they have some really great, there's some really great training on documentation. And it's getting easier and easier. With the tools that we have now, the computer that sits in your pocket can do a lot of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'd like to just comment that what we do up there in that, we put a log in our salt barn. We put a log by our bags of salt. There's a log in the front desk, and there's a log in our truck. Anyone who takes from any of those areas, signs it out, how much they use, where they used it, and what time they use it in. It gets reviewed every month by the management team just to go over it. So it's so important. And we have cameras, of course, too, so you could go back, but very important in any liability situation.
Yeah, I'd like to hear what Jeremy
That's
says
what I was
about
going to
that.
say. Jeremy, do you track salt
Yeah, I do.
use now?
Yeah.
Can you explain
So
that?
I do it for a few reasons. One, to keep track of and make sure everybody gets covered. Because Bolton's a unique little town, a lot like Lake George, where a lot of my customers are second homeowners, and they're not there. So they're not necessarily using that house, but I got to make sure I get that done. You know what I mean? So nothing gets forgotten. So that's one reason. And then to keep track of that. So, because my insurance company a long time ago when I started said it's a good idea to log everything you're doing just in case an event happens and you need to, show proof of, you were there. So yeah, I do document everything. Not so much the volume of what I'm putting down, but just that we did it, whether it's once or multiple times throughout a storm.
Ted, can you speak to what needs to be recorded with the green snow pole?
We don't have any requirements, so it really is up to the person, but it has to clearly show that they were not negligent, right? So I think the kinds of practices that I'm sure that Jeremy you're using, help you to do that. A picture on the way in and a picture on the way out could be very helpful. Now that it's so easy to do that, there are databases, there are products available for people now that can do that automatically. I'm sure that you could talk to Rakib about his own system that I'm sure has abilities to do some of that and track those things. So, and if he doesn't, I'm sure he can invent it in about 20 minutes. So that's really important. And I think there are some really good tools for people. But I think that's one of the places where if there were some, I think, additional outreach on that, it's probably helpful for the industry to be able to get better tools.
I think I see a hand in the back. Thanks.
Ted, Vinnie asked you a question before, and maybe I missed the answer. In New Hampshire, is there a cap on a liability award?
So it's a great question, and I didn't answer it. Thank you for bringing that back up. We don't have a cap. There's no monetary cap associated with it, other than what already sits in, whatever might be in state law. The way that it works is that essentially you should only be able to get sued if you were negligent. So what it really does is it changes the standard of review of your case, so that instead of you kind of having to defend all of that throughout, you go up front in the case and you say, I'm Green Snow Pro certified. And the standard that you're going to have to prove is that I was negligent. Not that you got hurt. You're going to have to prove, because that's what the law says, you are going to have to prove. So it puts the onus on the person bringing the suit that at some point they're going to have to prove that you were negligent. And if you show up at the any pre-hearings or whatever, you're Green Snow Pro certified, you've got all your documentation, and you've got all the pictures. You showed you were there. This was the morning that we plowed that. I'm sorry that Mrs. Jones got hurt when she was getting into her car, but we had all this. Now it's up to Mrs. Jones' attorney to say, all right, I have a very high bar now. And that's the way that our law is written. That's the way that you would have, that's the way that these cases would play out. So it isn't like a monetary cap.
So I don't think that's much different than New York State, okay? I believe that the onus is still on the person who's been injured, and they have to show that the other party was negligent and caused the injuries. So I was just trying to understand what the differences are in terms of this new law that got passed in New Hampshire versus other states in the country. And
Yeah, I think we need an attorney to sort of talk about how that actually works. And I will say that one of the things that we are going to be doing over the next 6 months is that we're going to be doing an analysis, a legal analysis, to show where, kind of what has been the effect, and has there been an effect? Are we actually seeing cases dropped? Are we seeing any of this getting challenged? What does that look like? What do settlements look like? Starting to work through that. And again, I think I think an attorney can help describe all of that a lot better than I can. And there are some attorneys in the state that have sort of specialized in these cases. And like I said, they've had mixed success.
Have you seen any settlements? Have you seen any settlements in relationship to these cases?
We still see settlements. We do still see settlements, and a lot of it, again, has to do with, and I think you raised this, is that when one of these cases goes forward, we have to provide all the documentation that this person was certified. So there's loopholes there. And then because if they missed a date, if they missed a piece of paper, then there's issues there with the certification, and then they also have to have documented. So as long as they've gotten through those hurdles, what we're understanding is that settlements are happening faster, and that they may not be as high a dollar amount. That's kind of what we're hearing. But again, this is really hard to measure. Believe it or not, it's really hard because the way that the legal system is distributed, and you don't really know what's in settlements all the time, is that it's very, very challenging to actually be able to judge the success of something like this. So that's something we're going to be working on with some legal folks over the next 6 months.
Well, that's because some of the settlements are, there's non-disclosure agreements. So you don't
There may be.
Yeah, so
Right.
you don't really know what the final outcome was in terms of the award, so
Right.
to speak.
Yeah, no, it's going to be really challenging to identify. But what we do know is that it certainly brings people to the table. It certainly brings people to get trained and to become, some portion of them become very, very into salt reduction activities. So we know that, and so from that perspective, it has been very successful.
I see a hand here on the straight back.
Ted, I'm curious, doesn't it involve additional costs to the state, this program, than we
Yes.
would have here in New York?
Yeah, I
You're
say
adding a third party, which is
right.
the state.
I will tell people, any state that's going to get into this, be prepared to spend money on staff and systems.
So what is that in New Hampshire?
So we have basically a position that's focused on this, and that's not enough. But that's what we have.
Can you say how many people are trained at the moment? Or how
Oh,
many?
we've done training for about 2,000 people. And every year, there's people that are always coming in and out of the program. But every year, we have somewhere around 600 certified applicators, mostly in the southern part of the state.
I'm thinking more in terms of when an action, a suit is filed,
Oh.
the state becomes a participant by
No.
virtue of this, or no?
We don't become a participant. All I have to do is basically a FOIL request. So I basically just provide all the paper that we have. This came in yesterday, or this week, in fact. And in fact, I showed the sign from Morgan & Morgan, which is like they advertise on TV. It's one of the largest litigation, firms in the country. And they're knocking on my door. So yes, certainly the litigation folks are paying very close attention to this. But my role ends at the point that I've certified someone and I keep all the records about that.
So the state doesn't have to appear in court should this?
No, we don't have to appear. Well, we potentially, if there was some question about Mr. Diers, the date stamp says that this was this, and the accident was this. Can you affirm that this was the date it was stamped in, and who stamped it in? Whose signature is that? So there could ultimately be something like that, but we don't come in as a party. I would be an innocent bystander.
So we only have a couple minutes left. So I think we've kind of heard from you all in terms of your immediate thoughts around what a limited liability law might be. But to Vinnie and Jeremie, if you had to say what's the biggest challenge and the biggest benefit of such a law, what would those be?
You want me to go first? Go ahead. To be honest with you, I'm not really sure. I haven't had an incident, knock on wood, so to speak, in the 20 years that I've been doing this. So I haven't been faced with that challenge of, I know I did a good job, but I'm still being sued kind of thing. So it would be nice to have that protection, but I don't know. That's about all I got on that.
That's good, thank you.
The biggest challenges, there's a few challenges. Being certified snow pro, does it help an insurance policy insurance premium to a contractor or not?
We have certain insurance companies that are certainly giving a lot of, keeping rates lower.
Yeah.
So instead of raising rates, nobody's given anybody anything from the insurance companies. I mean, let's be clear. So, but they certainly have helped keep rates low for some of those people, and some of the insurance companies are actually requiring.
They are?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the challenges be if the state gets challenged, like we talked about briefly before, and you're saying that New Hampshire's not there yet, but I would assume that at some point there's going to be a challenge to, and the state's going to be brought in to the courtroom. So I see that as a challenge to the taxpayer and to the whole process of it. I mean, a benefit of it is it creates some consistency. The Snow Pro program could be used, and it creates a consistent approach to it and a good reference on what to do, because lots of times businesses don't know what to do. They don't exactly know. I mean, even getting brine, for example, where do you get it? There should be a co-op for businesses. It's off topic a little, but there should be a co-op for brine.
No, I totally agree. One of the things that we're talking about in New Hampshire, the slide that I showed with the area with the drinking water, where they lost their well, thinking about maybe trying to get a community co-op where actually businesses could go in and be able to get brine, not have to make it on their own premises,
right,
which would open it up to smaller companies. Because
absolutely,
that's one of the big issues with especially smaller companies. And
Okay.
Anyway, sorry.
Well, so I have to interrupt you because we were trying to stay on time because we have a couple more presentations. Well, are we supposed to stay on time, or are we supposed to have more questions? I feel like I could have a conversation with y'all for about 4 hours. One more? Because it's you.
No, I just think, was there one back there?
I can't.
No, we're good. No, just for Vinnie and for Jeremie, the idea, and Ted had a slide on expectations, bare pavement expectations. I guess just what your thoughts are on that, and whether it's possible, what do your clients, customers think? Do they expect bare pavement? And is there a way to try to educate them more? I mean, Jeremie, if somebody's out of town, do they expect to have bare pavement?
Well, there's levels. Not all of them are the same. So I have HOAs, which require much more attention, where there's sidewalks and things of that nature. And then there's just your regular driveway and I leave it up to the customer to specify what they want. Do they want me at 1 inch? Do they want me at 3 inches? Do they want salt? Do they want sand? Do they want the walkway cleared? So I kind of put the onus on them to tell me what they want me to do.
Do they provide that? I mean,
yes.
Do they say, or do they want bare pavement? Is that?
Well, a couple of the homeowners association places that I was talking about, yes, I need to be right down to the bare pavement and, want to minimize slip factor to the best of our ability. So there's a level of babysitting that goes on with that. Not only the day of the storm or prior to the storm, but even the next day or a week later, because we get a lot of sun melt. And that's a big issue, actually, for me, is going back, and those sidewalks that were clear, 2 days later, they have a layer of ice about this far on the sidewalk. So there's, babysitting.
So one of my takeaways is that there's a need, and I think this came out earlier as well, for public education, and to your point, Ted, of changing expectations and a culture shift, and having customers understand the reasons why, as well as the people who are the professionals doing the maintenance to reduce the use of salt. So thank you, Ted and Vinnie and Jeremie, for your time and your perspectives. Again, I think this could be a much longer conversation, so appreciate what we got, and we'll move on back to Chris.
Thank you.